London, 1857. The grand ballroom of Havensworth House glittered with the wealth of England's finest families. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light upon silk gowns and polished jewels as the orchestra played a lively waltz. Standing at the edge of this splendid gathering, Alexander Blackwood, the 8th Duke of Westmoreland, observed the proceedings with carefully concealed disdain. "Your Grace," Lady Helena Pembroke approached, her daughter in tow. "May I present Miss Evangeline? She has just returned from finishing school in Paris." Alexander bowed, noting the young woman's perfect posture and practiced smile. "Miss Pembroke, a pleasure." "The pleasure is mine, Your Grace," she replied with a curtsy so precise it might have been measured with a ruler. This was the fourth such introduction of the evening. At 32, Alexander's unmarried state had become a matter of concern among the aristocracy. His late father had left the dukedom in disarray, and despite Alexander's efforts to restore its fortunes through shrewd investments, the whispers persisted: Westmoreland needed an advantageous match. "A fine prospect, wouldn't you agree?" inquired Lord Havensworth later, as they shared brandy in his study. "The Pembroke girl brings £50,000 and connections to 3 earldoms." Alexander swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "Indeed. Though I find myself increasingly weary of such calculations." "Calculations are the foundation of a proper aristocratic marriage," Havensworth replied. "Surely you don't entertain romantic notions at your age? The season will end soon. Your choice should be made before Parliament rises." Alexander nodded absently, his thoughts already drifting to the peaceful countryside awaiting him. London's marriage market had become insufferable, and he longed for the respite of his country estate in Derbyshire. "I depart for Thornfield tomorrow," he announced. "Estate business requires my attention." Havensworth frowned. "Running from your responsibilities, Westmoreland? The Ton will notice your absence." "Let them," Alexander replied, draining his glass. "I find I need fresh air." The village of Millfield nestled in the verdant valley below Thornfield Manor, its stone cottages and modest church spire a picture of rural tranquility. This peaceful scene greeted Alexander as his carriage rolled through the countryside 3 days later. Here, miles from London society, he could breathe freely again. Upon his arrival at Thornfield, his steward, Mr. Harrison, immediately bombarded him with estate matters. "The tenant farmers report the best wheat crop in years, Your Grace, but there's trouble with the mill. The old miller died last month, and his daughter attempts to run it alone. The village depends on that mill, but a woman cannot possibly, his daughter?" Alexander interrupted, removing his traveling gloves. "Yes, Miss Clara Bennett. Stubborn girl. Refuses to sell, though she can scarcely manage. I've tried reasoning with her, I shall see to it personally," Alexander decided, surprising himself. "Tomorrow." The following morning, Alexander rode to the mill, the spring air refreshing after London's oppressive atmosphere. The stone building stood beside a rushing stream, its grate wheel turning steadily. As he approached, he noticed a slender figure struggling with a heavy sack of grain. Dismounting quickly, he called out, "Allow me to assist you, miss." The young woman turned, startled. Flour dusted her simple dress and smudged one cheek, yet Alexander found himself momentarily transfixed. Her eyes, a striking shade of green, regarded him with wariness rather than the deference he typically encountered. "Thank you, sir, but I manage well enough," she replied, her voice clear and unwavering. Nonetheless, Alexander insisted, taking the sack and easily hoisting it onto his shoulder. "Where shall I put this?" She hesitated before pointing to an interior doorway. "The storeroom, if you insist." As he followed her direction, Alexander noted the mill's immaculate condition despite its age. Inside, everything was organized with evident care. "You run this establishment alone?" he asked, setting down his burden. "I do now," she answered. "My father taught me everything about milling since I was a child." "Are you new to Millfield, sir? I don't recall seeing you before." Alexander hesitated. In this moment, he found himself reluctant to reveal his title. I'm staying at Thornfield. Alexander Blackwood. Recognition dawned in her eyes. The Duke. I should have known from your fine clothes. She immediately cursed, though with less polish than the debutantes of London. Forgive my impropriety, Your Grace. Please, there's no need for formality here, he said quickly. You have the advantage of me, Miss Clara Bennett. She straightened, pride evident in her bearing despite her humble circumstances. And I suspect your steward has sent you to convince me to sell the mill. Alexander smiled slightly. Is that what you believe? It's what the entire village believes. Mr. Harrison has made no secret of his opinion that a woman cannot run a mill. She gestured to the functioning operation around them. Yet here we stand. Indeed we do. Alexander found himself charmed by her frankness. And the mill appears to be running admirably. Clara's expression softened slightly. It was my father's life's work. I couldn't bear to see it pass to strangers. I understand attachment to family legacy, Alexander replied, surprising himself with his sincerity. Though I must confess, I know little about milling. Perhaps you might educate me? The afternoon passed swiftly as Clara explained the intricacies of her trade. Alexander found himself genuinely fascinated, not merely by the technical aspects of the mill, but by Clara herself, her intelligence, her dedication, her complete lack of pretense. When he finally took his leave, he impulsively asked, "Might I return tomorrow? There's much more I wish to learn." Clara regarded him with curious surprise. "If it pleases your grace, though I can't imagine why a duke would take interest in something so common as flour." "Perhaps," Alexander replied with a smile, "I simply find the company refreshing." Over the following weeks, Alexander found himself drawn repeatedly to the mill. Each visit revealed new dimensions to Clara's character, her quiet strength, her dry wit, her unfailing kindness toward the villagers who depended on her services. She treated him not as a duke, but as a man, speaking her mind without reservation. It was utterly unlike any interaction he had experienced in London's drawing rooms. One afternoon, as they walked along the stream that powered the mill, Clara asked bluntly, "Why do you continue to visit, Your Grace? Surely you have more pressing matters than watching grain being ground to powder." Alexander considered his answer carefully. In London, every conversation is a calculation. Every relationship measured for advantage. Here. He gestured to the peaceful countryside. Here I find honesty. Is honesty so rare among the aristocracy? She asked. Rarer than diamonds, he replied with a wry smile. Tell me, Miss Bennett, if you could change one thing about your life, what would it be? Clara paused, looking toward the distant hills. I would wish for my father to have seen me succeed with the mill. He feared what would become of me after his passing. She turned to Alexander. And you, Your Grace? What would the wealthy Duke of Westmoreland change about his privileged existence? The loneliness of it, he answered without thinking, then looked away, surprised by his own candor. A comfortable silence fell between them before Clara spoke again. The village is holding its spring festival tomorrow evening. It's nothing like your London balls, I'm sure, but there will be dancing and good company. You would be welcome, if you wish to attend. Alexander smiled. I would be honored. The village green overflowed with laughter and music the following evening. Lanterns hung from trees, casting a warm glow over the festivities. Alexander arrived without fanfare, dressed more simply than his station typically demanded. He spotted Clara immediately, engaged in conversation with the village seamstress. Unlike the ladies of London in their elaborate gowns, Clara wore a modest blue dress, her chestnut hair simply arranged with a ribbon. Yet to Alexander, she outshone every duchess and countess he had ever encountered. When she caught sight of him, her smile of genuine pleasure sent an unexpected warmth through his chest. She approached, eyes bright with amusement. I confess, I half expected you wouldn't come, she said. Did you think I would find it beneath my dignity? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Perhaps, she admitted. This must seem terribly provincial compared to your usual entertainments. Alexander gazed at the joyful gathering. On the contrary, I find it far more authentic than any entertainment I've attended in years. The evening passed in a blur of country dances, honest conversation, and simple pleasures. When Alexander took Clara's hand for a dance, he noticed how perfectly it fit within his own. As they moved through the figures of the country reel, her laughter, unreserved and genuine, captivated him completely. Later, as they walked beneath the stars, he found himself confessing, I came to Thornfield to escape London's marriage market. Every eligible young lady paraded before me like prize cattle. Clara chuckled softly. How terrible for you, to have beautiful, wealthy women seeking your hand. Beautiful, perhaps. Genuine? Rarely. He stopped walking, turning to face her. They want the dukedom, not the man. And what does the man want? She asked quietly. Before he could answer, they were interrupted by the vicar calling for the traditional spring blessing. The moment passed, but Alexander's thoughts remained in turmoil long after he returned to Thornfield that night. The following week brought an unwelcome intrusion. Alexander was reviewing estate accounts when his butler announced, Lady Pembroke and Miss Evangeline Pembroke have arrived, Your Grace. They express their deepest apologies for coming without notice but hope their long-standing friendship with your family will excuse the impropriety. Alexander stifled a groan. Show them to the blue drawing room. I shall join them shortly. Lady Pembroke's transparent machinations became evident within minutes of their meeting. We were simply passing through on our way to visit my sister in the north, she explained, though her expectant smile belied the casual nature of their supposed journey. When we realized how close we were to Thornfield, we couldn't resist paying our respects. Miss Pembroke sat with perfect posture, her expression one of practiced modesty. I do hope we haven't imposed, Your Grace. Mother was most insistent we should call. Not at all, Alexander replied with the politeness ingrained since birth. Thornfield welcomes visitors, though I fear country life offers little excitement compared to London diversions. Oh, but the countryside has its own charms, Lady Pembroke insisted. We could stay a fortnight or more, couldn't we, Evangeline? The fresh air would do you good, my dear. Alexander inwardly balked at the transparent ploy but maintained his composure. Unfortunately, the house is ill-prepared for extended guests at present. Several chambers are under renovation. Lady Pembroke's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Perhaps we might stay at the local inn? I hear Millfield is quite picturesque. Trapped by propriety, Alexander could only acquiesce to showing them the estate grounds. As they walked the manicured gardens, Miss Pembroke strategically fell into step beside him. Your estate is magnificent, Your Grace, she observed. One can see the care with which it's maintained. Thank you. I'm fortunate in my steward and staff. A great house requires a mistress, does it not? She ventured. Someone to oversee the domestic arrangements and entertain distinguished guests? Before Alexander could formulate a suitably ambiguous response, he spotted a familiar figure approaching across the lawn. Clara carried a basket, likely containing the rare seed varieties they had discussed during his last visit to the mill. His heart quickened at the sight of her, then sank as he realized the inevitability of the impending encounter. Clara noticed the party and hesitated, clearly considering retreat, but Alexander raised a hand in greeting, leaving her no choice but to approach. Miss Bennett, he called, attempting to sound merely cordial rather than pleased. What brings you to Thornfield today? Clara cursed neatly before the assembled party. Your Grace, I've brought those wheat samples we discussed. Her eyes flicked briefly to his companions, taking in their fine London attire with a single glance. How thoughtful. May I present Lady Pembroke and her daughter, Miss Evangeline Pembroke? They are visiting from London. Alexander performed the introductions with practiced ease. This is Miss Clara Bennett, who runs our local mill with remarkable efficiency. Lady Pembroke's eyebrows rose a fraction. A female miller? How unusual. It was my father's trade, my lady, Clara replied evenly. I merely continue his work. How admirable, Miss Pembroke commented with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Though surely a husband would be a better solution to your circumstances. Clara's spine stiffened, but her voice remained composed. I find my circumstances quite satisfactory without one, Miss Pembroke. Not all women measure their worth by matrimonial prospects. Alexander suppressed a smile at her riposte. Miss Bennett provides an essential service to the estate and village. The quality of her flour is unmatched in the county. Lady Pembroke's expression suggested she found the topic of flour entirely beneath notice. Fascinating. Shall we continue our tour, Your Grace? I'm particularly eager to see the famous rose garden. As they moved on, Alexander glanced back to see Clara standing alone, her expression unreadable. Something in his chest constricted painfully at the sight. That evening, the Pembrokes dined at Thornfield, having taken rooms at the village inn as Lady Pembroke had suggested. Throughout the meal, Alexander found his thoughts repeatedly drifting to Clara, wondering what she might make of the elaborate service and stilted conversation. When Miss Pembroke played the pianoforte after dinner, competently but without passion, he remembered Clara's unrestrained laughter during the village dance. Your daughter plays beautifully, he complimented Lady Pembroke automatically. Evangeline has had the finest masters since childhood, she replied. She excels in all the accomplishments a duchess might require. Music, French, watercolors, household management. Alexander nodded absently, his mind elsewhere. Indeed. I hope we might call again tomorrow, Lady Pembroke continued. Perhaps a drive through the countryside? Evangeline so enjoys natural beauty. I regret that tomorrow I have pressing business in the village, Alexander replied, the idea forming as he spoke. Perhaps another day. The following morning found Alexander at the mill once more. Clara greeted him with obvious surprise. I didn't expect to see you today, she said, wiping flour from her hands. Not with your distinguished guests requiring entertainment. I needed to escape, he admitted. Lady Pembroke's determination to secure me for her daughter has become rather suffocating. Clara turned away, adjusting a lever on the mill equipment. Miss Pembroke seems exactly what a duke should want in a wife. Beautiful, accomplished, well-connected. Is that what you believe I want? It doesn't matter what I believe, she replied. The world has expectations of men in your position. Alexander stepped closer. And if I find those expectations hollow? If I prefer substance to surface, truth to pretense? Clara finally met his gaze, her expression guarded. Then I would say you risk disappointment, Your Grace. The aristocracy rarely rewards those who defy convention. Clara, he began, but was interrupted by the arrival of a tenant farmer with grain to be milled. The moment broken, Alexander took his leave, troubled by the distance he sensed between them. For the first time, he confronted the growing truth in his heart. His feelings for Clara had progressed far beyond admiration or friendship. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. 3 days later, disaster struck. Alexander was meeting with his steward when the news arrived: the mill had caught fire. Without hesitation, he raced to the village, heart pounding with fear for Clara's safety. The scene that greeted him was one of organized chaos. Villagers formed a bucket chain from the stream to the burning building, working desperately to control the flames. Through the smoke, Alexander spotted Clara directing their efforts, her face streaked with soot. Clara, he called, dismounting before his horse had fully stopped. She turned, relief briefly crossing her features. The fire started in the storage room. We've managed to contain it to the east wing, but, her voice broke. Years of work, destroyed in moments. Without thinking, Alexander removed his coat and joined the bucket line, working alongside the villagers for hours until the flames were finally extinguished. As night fell, the extent of the damage became clear. While the main milling equipment had been saved, the storage areas and part of the roof had been destroyed. Clara stood amidst the ruins, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. When Alexander approached, she looked up with eyes dimmed by despair. "What will I do now?" she whispered. "The village needs the mill, but the repairs would cost more than I can possibly afford." "Let me help," Alexander said immediately. "I can provide funds, charity from the Duke?" Clara interrupted, a flash of pride momentarily overcoming her distress. "I cannot accept that." "Not charity," he insisted. "An investment. The mill is vital to the estate as well as the village." Clara shook her head. "Even if I could accept, the repairs would take weeks. The harvest is approaching. Without the mill functioning." She left the dire implications unspoken. Alexander paced the smoke-damaged floor, mind racing. "What if we built a temporary milling station using the equipment we saved? My estate has timber and laborers. We could have something functional within days, enough to process the coming harvest while proper repairs are made to the building." Hope flickered in Clara's eyes. Could it be done so quickly? With enough hands, yes. Alexander's determination grew with each word. "The village will help. They need the mill as much as you need their grain." For the first time since the fire began, Clara's shoulders straightened. "Then we shall rebuild. Together." The following days saw an extraordinary transformation. Under Alexander's direction, estate workers and villagers labored side by side to construct a temporary milling operation beside the damaged building. Clara worked tirelessly alongside them, her knowledge proving invaluable. Lady Pembroke and her daughter observed these developments with poorly concealed disapproval from the village inn. When Alexander failed to call upon them for 3 consecutive days, they finally sought him out at the mill site. "Your Grace," Lady Pembroke exclaimed, aghast at the sight of the Duke of Westmoreland with rolled sleeves, directing the placement of a millstone. "What on earth are you doing?" Alexander straightened, unapologetic for his disheveled appearance. "Helping to restore an essential village service, Lady Pembroke." "But surely your steward could oversee such manual labor," Miss Pembroke suggested, delicately lifting her skirts away from the construction debris. "Some matters require personal attention," Alexander replied. Lady Pembroke's gaze shifted to Clara, who was instructing 2 carpenters nearby. "I see," she said coldly. "We had hoped to bid you farewell before our departure tomorrow." "You're returning to London?" Alexander inquired, unable to mask his relief entirely. "Yes. It seems the country air doesn't agree with Evangeline after all." Lady Pembroke's tight smile conveyed her understanding of the situation perfectly. "I wish you good fortune with your project, Your Grace." After they departed, Clara approached cautiously. "I believe I've just cost you an advantageous match." "On the contrary," Alexander replied, watching the Pembrokes' retreating figures, "you've saved me from a lifelong sentence." Their eyes met, and for a moment, something profound and unspoken passed between them. The temporary mill began operation just in time for the harvest, much to the village's collective relief. As Alexander had promised, work on repairing the original structure continued simultaneously. Throughout it all, he and Clara worked in seamless partnership, their mutual respect deepening with each passing day. One evening, as they reviewed plans for the rebuilt storage rooms, Alexander found himself distracted by the way the lamplight caught in Clara's hair. When she looked up, catching him staring, he didn't look away. "What is it?" she asked softly. "I was just thinking how remarkable you are," he answered honestly. "Most people would have surrendered to despair after such a disaster." Clara smiled faintly. "Bennets are not easily defeated. So I've observed." He hesitated, then added, "London society would benefit from such resilience." "I doubt London society would welcome a miller's daughter," she replied. "They would if she were a duchess." The words hung in the air between them. Clara's eyes widened as their import registered. Alexander, she began carefully, using his given name for the first time. You cannot mean, I do mean it, he interrupted, taking her hand. I love you, Clara. Not for your station or your dowry or your connections, but for your mind and heart and spirit. I love you in a way I never thought possible. Clara withdrew her hand, rising from her chair. You speak of impossibilities. A duke cannot marry a miller. Why not? Alexander challenged, standing to face her. Because society would disapprove? Let them. My title is mine to bestow as I choose, and I choose you. You speak from the heart, not from reason, Clara argued. Think of your position, your responsibilities. You need a wife who understands that world. I need a wife who understands me, he countered. Who sees the man, not the dukedom. Who challenges rather than simpers, who speaks truth rather than platitudes. He stepped closer. I need you, Clara. She turned away, visibly struggling with emotion. You romanticize me because I'm different from what you know. But the novelty would fade, and then you would regret, never. Alexander gently turned her to face him again. I have spent my life surrounded by novelty and luxury. What I've never had until now is someone who makes me feel truly alive. He took both her hands in his. I don't ask for your answer tonight. Only that you consider the possibility of us, together. Clara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I will consider it, she whispered, before slipping away into the night. 2 days passed without word from Clara. Alexander respected her need for space, though the waiting tested his resolve. On the 3rd day, a letter arrived from London that demanded his immediate attention. His solicitor reported irregularities in his investments that required personal intervention. Reluctantly, Alexander prepared to depart for London, leaving instructions for the mill repairs to continue in his absence. He rode to the mill one last time, hoping to speak with Clara before his journey, but found only her assistant. Miss Bennett left for Thornfield an hour ago, Your Grace, the young man informed him. Said she had urgent business with you. Alexander raced back to his estate, only to learn from his butler that Clara had indeed called but, upon learning of his planned departure, had left without leaving a message. Frustrated and confused, Alexander had no choice but to begin his journey to London, his heart heavy with unresolved feelings. The capital greeted him with its usual commotion and complexity. For a week, Alexander was consumed with financial matters, working with his solicitor to untangle the investment concerns. Throughout it all, his thoughts repeatedly returned to Derbyshire and to Clara. Then came the society gossip. It began as a whisper at his club, where Lord Havensworth approached with a concerned expression. Westmoreland, there's talk circulating about you and some country girl. A tradesperson? Surely not. What talk? Alexander demanded. Lady Pembroke has been rather vocal about her abbreviated stay in Derbyshire, Havensworth explained delicately. Something about the Duke of Westmoreland forgetting his position, laboring like a common workman for a miller's daughter. Alexander's jaw tightened. Lady Pembroke should mind her own affairs. It's already in the gossip pages, Havensworth pressed. Veiled references, of course, but clear enough to those who matter. You must address this before it damages your standing further. That evening, Alexander received a visit from his oldest friend, the Earl of Mountclair. I came as soon as I heard, Mountclair said without preamble. Is it true? Have you actually fallen for a country miller? Alexander poured them both a brandy. Her name is Clara Bennett, and yes, I have offered for her. Mountclair whistled low. Bold move, even for you. What did she say? She asked for time to consider. Sensible woman, Mountclair commented. She understands better than you what she would face here. He gestured around at the opulent surroundings. The ton would crucify her, Alexander. They're cruel enough to their own kind, imagine what they'd do to an outsider. I would protect her, Alexander insisted. You can't be with her every moment, his friend countered. The whispers, the snubs, the closed doors, it would be relentless. He leaned forward earnestly. Do you care for this woman enough to subject her to that? The question haunted Alexander for days afterward. Meanwhile, the gossip intensified. At a dinner party he could not politely avoid, he overheard two dowagers speculating about the Duke's peasant mistress and how many pounds it would take to buy her off. Alexander left the gathering early, his decision made. The next morning, he departed for Derbyshire. Clara stood at the partially rebuilt mill, supervising the installation of the new roof beams, when a murmur ran through the workers. She turned to find Alexander approaching, still in his London attire. Her heart stuttered at the sight of him, then raced as he strode directly toward her with purpose in every step. Your Grace, she greeted him formally, aware of the many eyes upon them. We didn't expect your return so soon. Walk with me, he requested quietly. They followed the stream path until they were out of earshot of the workers. Alexander stopped beneath an oak tree, his expression grave. You left without speaking to me, he began. I came to refuse your offer, Clara explained. Then learned you were departing for London and realized how appropriate that was, you returning to your world, me remaining in mine. Is that truly what you want? Alexander asked, studying her face. Clara looked away. What I want is irrelevant. I've had time to reflect on the impossibility of, I've missed you, he interrupted softly. Every day in London, surrounded by so-called civilization, I missed your honesty, your strength, your smile. Alexander, London society is already gossiping about us, he continued. Lady Pembroke saw to that. Clara paled. Then you understand why we cannot. I understand that I have a choice, he said firmly. I can bow to their expectations and live half a life, or I can choose happiness with you and accept whatever consequences come. The consequences would fall most heavily on me, Clara pointed out. I would be forever the miller who ensnared a duke. Never accepted, always scrutinized. Alexander took her hands. Then we won't give them the chance. What do you mean? We'll live here, he proposed. At Thornfield, yes, but engaged with the community, not separate from it. London can manage without another duke in attendance. His eyes searched hers. Unless you truly do not share my feelings? Clara's composure finally broke. You know I do, she whispered. From the moment you carried that sack of grain for me, something changed. But loving you terrifies me, Alexander. Not because of your title, but because loving you means stepping into a world that will never fully accept me. Then we create our own world, he said, drawing her closer. One where titles matter less than character, where worth is measured by actions rather than ancestry. He cupped her face gently. I love you, Clara Bennett. Will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife, my duchess, my partner in all things? For an answer, Clara rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss began tentatively but deepened as Alexander wrapped his arms around her, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in his world. When they finally parted, Clara smiled through tears. Yes, she said simply. Yes. The wedding took place in Millfield's ancient church 3 months later. Despite Alexander's status, the ceremony was deliberately modest, with local villagers outnumbering the handful of aristocratic guests. The Earl of Montclair stood as best man, while Clara's childhood friend, now the village schoolteacher, served as her attendant. As Clara walked down the aisle in a gown of cream silk, far simpler than any London bride would have chosen, Alexander watched with undisguised adoration. When they exchanged vows, his voice rang clear with certainty. With this ring, I thee wed, he proclaimed, sliding the gold band onto her finger. With my body, I thee worship. With all my worldly goods, I thee endow. The village celebration afterward lasted well into the evening. Alongside the traditional wedding breakfast for the gentry guests, tables laden with food and drink were set up on the village green for all to enjoy. Alexander and Clara moved between both worlds with ease, her natural dignity complementing his relaxed authority. As darkness fell and lanterns were lit, Alexander led his bride in their first dance as husband and wife. The villagers watched with approval as their duke waltzed with the miller's daughter who had become their duchess. "Any regrets?" Alexander murmured against her ear. Clara gazed up at him, her eyes reflecting the lantern light. "Only that my father isn't here to see this day." "He would be proud," Alexander assured her. "You've not only preserved his legacy but expanded it beyond anything he might have imagined." Later that night, as they stood on the terrace of Thornfield Manor, now their shared home, Clara leaned against her husband's shoulder. "What do you suppose they're saying in London?" she wondered. "That the Duke of Westmoreland has lost his mind," Alexander replied with a chuckle. "That he's abandoned civilization for a country existence with his common-born wife." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "And they're absolutely correct." "And you're truly content with that?" Clara asked. "Never returning to your rightful place in society?" Alexander smiled, drawing her close. "My rightful place is wherever you are, my love. Whether that's in a grand ballroom or a humble mill matters not at all." He brushed a tender kiss across her lips. "Though I must warn you, Montclair has threatened to bring half the peerage to visit next summer. He claims they need to witness our scandalous happiness firsthand." Clara laughed, the sound carrying across the moonlit gardens. "Let them come. By then, they'll find a duchess who knows her own worth, flower-covered apron and all." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Alexander replied, sealing his declaration with a kiss that promised a lifetime of defying expectations, together.